grade Fit Night. My name is Hannah, and I am here with Nikki Mackey for first grade and Sonia Gregory for second grade. We appreciate you joining us. Stay tuned for more information about each grade level.
Hello again. I'm Hannah Woods, supporting kindergarten math teaching and learning in CMS. This quarter, students in kindergarten are learning about describing measurable attributes of an object, comparing two objects by their measurable attributes, classifying objects, and counting the number of objects in each category. Students will also be identifying shapes by attributes, by name regardless of orientation, and within the environment. Identifying shapes as two-dimensional or three-dimensional, analyzing and comparing shapes, building and drawing shapes, and composing larger shapes from smaller simple shapes. Today, I will be showing you some examples of student learning that your mathematicians will take part of during quarter 4. So far this school year, kindergartners have been learning and working with numerals and quantities 0 to 20, and continually practicing rote counting to 100. During this quarter, your students will now learn about geometry and measurement. Geometry and measurement strongly support spatial reasoning. Spatial reasoning and spatial visualization are skills that help students in all other mathematics, learning, and achievement. As students develop spatial visualization skills, they are practicing flexibility in their thinking. When students begin describing objects, they may first identify the color. In kindergarten, students will learn measurable attributes. Since how orange the book is, or how much rounder an object is than another, is difficult to measure, students start practicing some comparative language, such as larger, smaller, taller, shorter, heavier, lighter, to describe objects. Students will first describe and compare objects by one measurable attribute. But as they have more experiences, they will be able to discern multiple measurable attributes of the same object. Students will also categorize objects by attributes of their choosing. In this example, any object heavier than the feather. Students may make a chart, as they have practiced in the past, to organize their thinking, or move objects to an area and designate what that area means. In this example, heavier than a feather or not heavier than a feather. Here we have a book, a bottle, a paper clip, and some expo markers. It will be important for students to continue to practice past learning and count the objects that fit into each category. Students can identify measurable attributes in context. One game that takes very little preparation is Compare the Pair. Give your child 2 items and have them describe the attributes. You can ask questions to help get your child started, like, which is longer? Which is shorter? Which is heavier? Which is lighter? If Compare the Pair becomes too easy, you can introduce a 3rd item and have your child order them by an attribute. The spatula is taller and the whisk is shorter. They are in order from tallest to shortest. During 4th quarter, children learn to match, name, describe, represent, construct, and classify 2-dimensional or flat geometric shapes. They will begin to increasingly use mathematical properties of the shapes, which teachers will refer to as measurable attributes. Students will practice distinguishing between sides and corners, and they may think of the angles or corners as pointy. They can use manipulatives representing parts of a shape, such as sides, compose or make a shape that looks like a goal shape. Students will also begin to differentiate between 2D and 3D shapes and recognize faces of 3D shapes as 2D shapes.
Here we have a square as the face of the cube and a circle as a face of the cylinder. Helping students create mental images comes from the use of concrete and digital resources. These experiences support moving understanding to long-term memory. Students may first begin matching familiar shapes, such as a square or a typical triangle, that have the same size and orientation. As they have more experience with shapes, they will begin to see familiar shapes regardless of size or orientation. It is helpful for students to build, touch, create, and feel shapes, especially in their environment. Students can use a variety of items to create 2D or flat and 3D or solid shapes. Here are 2 examples using Q-tips and toothpicks. Students can use Play-Doh to create a sphere and even toothpicks and Play-Doh to create a cube. Students can identify shapes in context. One game that takes nothing but time and attention is I Spy Shapes. You can spy 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional shapes in your home or on a car ride for some added challenge. In this kitchen, what shapes could you spy? I can spy a rectangle, that is the cupboard door, and a cylinder that holds the flour. Although the upcoming topics are about geometry and measurement, I want to again remind you to support the end of grade expectation for kindergartners to rote count to 100. Counting forward and backwards, skip counting, or seeing how high you can count are little games you can play at home that help the students develop an understanding of the patterns in our number system. I hope you've enjoyed your time thinking about kindergarten math. We appreciate all of your efforts at home and your continued partnership in developing mathematical minds.
Hello, I'm Nikki Mackey and I support first grade math teaching and learning in CMS. This quarter, students in first grade are learning about measuring and comparing lengths of objects, telling time in hours and half hours on an analog and digital clock, identify a quarter, dime, nickel, pennies, and relate their values to pennies. Describe, build, and draw attributes that determine a 2D and a 3D shape. So they are describing those 2D and 3D shapes, and then they compose shapes from other shapes. They partition circles and rectangles into halves and fourths. Today, I will be showing you the measurement expectations for first grade and how it sets the foundation for learning to measure objects in future grades. Like Hannah said, in kindergarten, students describe objects' length, weight, and size. They are called measurable attributes of the object. They use words like heavy, light, big, small, long, short to compare objects. Kindergarten teachers will say things like this to students. Use some measurement words to tell me about this book or feather. In first grade, we build on the idea of comparing lengths. Students compare the relationship between 3 objects. For example, the blue crayon is longer than the red crayon. The red crayon is longer than the green crayon. Based on the relationships, the students can also conclude that the blue crayon is longer than the green crayon. Then they can talk about the crayons from shortest to longest or longest to shortest. The second part of the measurement idea in first grade is to order objects that may not be able to be moved. For example, to compare the length of a bookshelf to the length of a desk, you could cut a string that is the same length of the bookshelf. You can then compare the piece of string with the desk. If the string is longer than the desk, then you know the bookshelf is longer than the desk. This is helpful when knowing if you should move heavy furniture. Ask students to identify this around your house. First grade students are not required to use tools with standard units just yet. We won't be using rulers, tape measures, yardsticks, or any tools with inches, centimeters, feet, yards, or any other units of measure. We build an understanding of how to measure with multiple smaller objects. Some smaller objects we use in the classroom are cubes, tiles, paper clips. Let's look at what this would look like if I measured a pencil. Pencil with paper clips first. I'm going to start at the very end, and I'm going to measure, and I'm going to line my paper clips up end to end with no gaps or overlaps. They are touching, but they are not overlapping. So I could say my pencil is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paper clips long. What we do is we measure with smaller objects and repeat those objects. Let's try it with tiles. This is what it would look like if there was a gap. This is what it would look like if there was an overlap. We want them to touch but not overlap. So we could say this pencil is about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tiles long. I can even measure with cubes. And I could say this pencil is 10 cubes long. We measure from end to end with no gaps or overlaps. Let your children measure things around the house. You can use cereal, pennies, crackers, whatever you have at home. We also explore the idea that when different sized units are used to measure the same object, the sizes of the units must be considered rather than just relying on the amount of objects counted. So it may take 5 tiles to measure this pencil, but only 3 paper clips. Some students may think 1 is wrong and 1 is right. They are both correct answers. The paper clips are larger than the tiles, so it will take more tiles than paper clips to measure this pencil. Practice this idea at home. Second grade is when students will build upon their first grade experiences and start to measure with standard units like inches, feet, centimeters, and meters. Until then, let them experience measuring things around the house without gaps or overlaps, starting at the end and going all the way to the other end.
Welcome to second grade mathematics. My name is Sonia Gregory, a CMS elementary math specialist. I support second grade math teaching and learning. In this segment, you will become familiar with the mathematics that your second grader is expected to know, understand, and do during quarter 4. Fourth quarter learning includes estimate, measure, and compare the lengths of objects in standard units. Solve measurement word problems involving length measures. Use bar graphs and picture graphs to solve problems. Describe, draw, and build 2D and 3D shapes. And lastly, divide circles, squares, and rectangles into halves, thirds, and fourths. In first grade, students measured the lengths of objects with non-standard units. Non-standard units are things like paper clips, colored tiles, centimeter cubes like the ones on a base 10 block set, connecting cubes, and other objects. In second grade, students use standard units to measure the lengths and heights of objects. Standard units include inches, feet, yards, centimeters, and meters. Students use different measuring tools, such as rulers, to measure an object in inches. They use yardsticks or tape measures to measure an object in feet or yards. Students also use a ruler to measure an object in centimeters and use a tape measure or meter stick to measure an object in meters. Students come to learn which measuring tool is the best tool to use to measure an object. They make these decisions based on the size of units and the size of objects. Which tool would you use to measure the length and height of each object? Pause the video and identify the tool you would use to measure each object. Then explain why you chose that measuring tool to measure the object. When you finish, press play. Students' first experiences choosing the right measuring tool to measure an object should be with real-life objects. They come to make sense of the relationship of the size of a unit to the size of an object being measured. Then they must further decide if they will actually use inches or centimeters and explain why. These experiences should come before choosing the right measuring tools for objects found in pictures. Here is an example of two pencils measured in inches. Students first learn to line up the zero on a tool with the edge of an object. This is easier with rulers students make, but more challenging with standard or commercial rulers where the zero is not in line with the edge of the ruler. Then students find the length or height of an object by counting the number of spaces it takes to get to the opposite end of the object. The spaces are between the numbers on the measuring tool, starting at 0. For example, the colorful pencil at the top is 9 inches long because the end count is 9 length units or 9 spaces from 0. Once students learn to measure from 0, they explore measuring from numbers other than 0. The green pencil is 6 inches long because you count 6 length units or the 6 spaces on the ruler from one end of the green pencil to the opposite end. What do you notice about the lengths of the screwdrivers? Pause the video and jot down what you notice in the picture and any questions you have. When you finish, press play. Two important measurement concepts are developed in quarter 4. The first big idea is that an object can be measured twice using different units of measurement, and it takes more or less units of one measurement to measure an object depending on the size of the unit. For example, this screwdriver is measured in inches and in centimeters. Even though the number 9 is 14 less than 23, 9 inches is about the same distance on a ruler as 23 centimeters. Since inches are bigger units of measurement, it takes less of them to measure the screwdriver. Centimeters are smaller units of measurement, therefore it takes more centimeters to measure the length of the same screwdriver. Second graders will learn how to survey others by asking a question and recording their answers in a table, like the one you see at the top of the screen. Students will use that information to create bar graphs and pictographs. Second graders will also learn to read, analyze, and interpret information in tables and graphs created by others. Second graders will build upon their fraction understanding from first grade. Which squares are divided into fourths? Pause the video and select the squares that are divided into 4 equal parts. When you finish, press play. Students not only identify 2D and 3D shapes, but they also learn that shapes can be divided into equal parts, or fractions. In first grade, they identified halves and fourths. In second grade, they are introduced to thirds. They explore ways to divide a circle, square, and rectangle into fourths in different ways. All of the squares you see here are divided into fourths. Even though each fourth may be a different shape, they're all the same size because they cover the same amount of space. Second graders may engage in fraction exploration activities such as folding and cutting paper shapes into halves, thirds, and fourths. They may stack same shape parts to make sure the parts are equal sizes, or they may fit different fourths together, like a puzzle, to make a whole square. Another exploration activity may be to draw lines inside of circles, squares, and rectangles to create 2 halves, 3 thirds, and 4 fourths. Some ways you can help your second grader at home are: create opportunities for your child to measure different objects around the house using inches, feet, yards, centimeters, and meters. Ask questions about the reasonableness of measurements, such as, do we need 2 inches of ribbon or 2 feet of ribbon to wrap the gift? Ask your child to estimate or guess the length or height of an object, then measure it to see how close the estimate is to the actual measurement. You can have your child measure an object in inches and in centimeters, then explain why the measurements are different. Help your child conduct surveys by asking questions with up to 4 categories. Afterwards, help him or her show the information in a bar graph or picture graph. Another thing you could do is allow your child to trace, fold, and cut circles, squares, and rectangles into halves, thirds, and fourths, and discuss whether or not the parts are equal. Lastly, have your child identify halves, thirds, and fourths in the real world. To learn more about K-5 mathematics instruction and resources in CMS, go to the CMS public website at www.cms.k12.nc.us. Click Departments, then click Curriculum and Instruction, Elementary Curriculum, and lastly, click Elementary Math. Scroll down and read about elementary mathematics in CMS, and to peruse a slide deck, which shows the scope and sequence of math topics per grade level. To find out what math content is addressed in each grade level topic, click the Homeschool Connection link underneath the slide deck. This will take you to a Google folder in Google Drive, which contains family letters from Envision Mathematics, our district elementary math curriculum. These letters provide a brief overview of what your child will learn in each topic. There is one PDF copy per grade level in English and in Spanish inside the folder. Additionally, your child's Canvas coursework includes information about the topic currently being taught. Contact information for each elementary math specialist is listed at the bottom of the page. Another great resource at your child's fingertips is Dreambox. This website is free for all K-5 students in CMS and provides your child opportunities to practice the skills they need through engaging games, lessons, and practice problems geared toward their grade level. Information about Dreambox is on the CMS website. Just click Families, Student Portal, then scroll down to K-5 and click on the Dreambox icon. Contact your child's teacher for more information about Dreambox, as well as how to access Dreambox so your child can start taking advantage of this amazing resource.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We have enjoyed spending this time with you, thinking and learning about kindergarten through second grade math. Please add any questions you may have to the forum. We will be updating the FAQ document located on the CMS Math website. Again, to access the forum and submit a question, please use the bit.ly that you now see on the screen. Remember that it is case sensitive, so make note of the capital and lowercase letters. That is bit.ly/fitnightquestions. Everyone have a great evening. Thanks.